This is a package of croutons that I just purchased at the local grocery store. The croutons themselves don't matter. I care about the price. Today it cost me $4. Last month it cost me $3. Last year it cost me $2. Technically the croutons themselves haven't changed. They still taste the exact same. They still feel the same. They still have the same texture. Now as you probably know, this is due to what is called inflation. And it's not just the croutons that are going up. I was fed up with this and ended up spending several hours researching why exactly this happens. What I found? Okay, that's great. Inflation. Whatever that is, whatever that means, I want to know why. Why is this happening right now? For the last 10 years, heck, for the last 40 years, this has never happened to the extent that is happening in the 2020s. This concept of diminishing returns on capital has led me to go down a deep and dark rabbit hole to see what really was the root of this. And the reason I found had to do with rocks. In order to truly find out what the cause of this inflation was, we have to go back to the last time it was this high, back in the 1980s. Back then, it was a different time. Cars on the road were Ford Escorts, Renault Espace, and Fiat Pandas. Yes, Panda was its name. But despite the cars being named after big black and white species, there was something else going on. In fact, for that, we have to go even farther back. The 1970s marked a year when a lot of the boomers were getting out of college and finding jobs. This era marked the end of drive-in movie theaters and $2 movie tickets. But more importantly, movie theater prices were really the prices of any good that did not just fluctuate wildly year over year over year. Okay, pause right there. So there is this statistic that federal governments and financial advisors pay very close attention to. And this statistic is what is called the CPI. Now that stands for the Consumer Price Index. The purpose of the CPI is to measure the nominal increase in the prices of goods and services year over year over year over year. And this is done to see how the prices of goods change over time. Now, when we look at a CPI graph from the 1950s on, we tend to see something a bit, well, strange and weird at around 1970. In fact, right here, something happens. Ideally, this graph would look something like this one, with a straight line showing a steady but slow increase in the price of goods and services over time. But instead, it looks something like this. So what caused this point right here? Well, as it turns out, it has everything to do with... During the 1970s, there were 3 presidents: Nixon, Ford, and Carter. Now, each president had slightly different monetary policy. I don't want to get political, but it all can be summed up, well, right here. This is the blown up part of the graph we looked at earlier, except this one is just from 1970 to 1980. This shows the inflation in red and the unemployment in blue. Now, the unemployment is not what we were curious about, so we just want to focus on the inflation. From just looking at the presidents and the inflation, we can make 2 quick judgments. Something happened here during Nixon's presidency, and something else happened right here during Carter's presidency that led to corresponding spikes in inflation. But what? Well, part of it has to do with rocks. Yes, rocks. Particularly shiny rocks. This rock pops up all over our history. In fact, it was one of the 3 reasons the US was even settled by European explorers and conquistadors. This rock is called gold. Nixon, best known for his scandal at Watergate, made one of the most consequential decisions regarding gold in 1971. He fully implemented his monetary policy called Nixon Shock. As a part of this policy, he ended what was called the Bretton Woods Agreement that had been around since the end of World War II. This agreement was the first system used to control the value of money between countries. In fact, this system meant that each country had to have a monetary policy that kept the exchange rate of its currency within a fixed value, plus or minus on a percent of the value of gold during that period. This agreement helped the general public foster faith in their country's currencies following the Great War, as currency was backed by something of value. By ending this agreement, Nixon severed the US dollar's connection to gold. And this all happened on August 15, 1971, when it was signed into law. This meant that we no longer had to keep our dollars at a benchmark price in relation to something else. In fact, now we had the freedom to print pretty much as much of it as we wanted. But this isn't a big deal. I mean, cutting the connection between our country's currency and gold can't hurt us, right? I mean, everybody will just believe that this has value, and then they'll just trade it with each other to get other things of value, and it doesn't really need to be connected to anything. We don't really need to go in and trade this in for gold, right? Wrong. As a result, Ford and Carter and all the other presidents that follow now could implement monetary policy that would allow them to print off as much money as they needed. As a result, record high inflation throughout the 1970s and early 1980s. During the middle of the 1970s, this inflation was pushed up to 12.3%. The Fed started practicing stop-go monetary policy and raised benchmark rates as high as 16% before dropping them back down again. However, this would eventually launch the United States into a recession from 1981 to 1982. So in addition to driving around pandas, they also had to deal with record high inflation at the time and a recession fresh on their minds. Sound familiar? Okay, but you think we'd learn our lesson. I mean, inflation can't happen at a high level if our monetary supply is stable. You'd think we'd learn our lesson by not printing money we don't have, right? Wrong. So this is where we are now. Presidents with their cabinets have the complete control and ability to print off as much money as they need to fulfill whatever stimulus, whatever plans, whatever government spending that they want and achieve their policies. However, now we are seeing the true backlash of such a policy. This policy allows them to print off more, making each one that they print off worth slightly less. And the true losers in this situation are us, the American public, because the government can just keep printing. We can't. There's a saying that says, history is the best teacher. But it only is if we truly learn from it. How long will this inflation last? Well, some analysts estimate 10 years, some estimate 2 years. We don't truly know quite yet. I suppose only time will tell. I can only guess at how much my croutons will cost in another 3 years. I'm Steve Ethan, and I'll see you in the next one.